Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto and Kushina date for 3 years and married? And subscribe if you enjoy the video. And also check the description. So let's begin the story. The river did not care that it had never happened before. Water moved the way water always moved, indifferent, constant, cold in the way that rivers near Konoha's eastern wall ran cold even in late summer, fed by the snow melt that trickled down from the mountain ranges that nobody went to unless they had business with stone and altitude, and silence. The river did not slow when the boy fell into it. It did not adjust. It simply received him the way it received everything: leaves, branches, the occasional forgetful academy student who learned the hard way not to train too close to the bank, and it carried him downstream with the democratic efficiency of water that has somewhere to be. He came to rest against a cluster of rocks near the shallows. He did not move for a long time. Kushina Uzumaki had been awake since before dawn, which was not unusual for her. Sleep had always been something she approached the way other people approached an unreliable mission partner, with cautious optimism and no genuine expectation of success. She was 17 years old, and she had been sleeping poorly since she was 10. Since the day she had arrived in this village as a frightened girl with red hair that marked her as foreign, as other, as the kind of thing people whispered about when they thought she couldn't hear them, she had learned to stop minding. Mostly. This particular morning she had given up on sleep around 4 and gone to train by the river because the river was the one place in Konoha that belonged entirely to the morning and not to anyone else. The birds there were unreasonable and persistent, and she liked them for it. She had been running through her chain-fighting forms for an hour, her red hair bound back in its twin tails, her chakra settled and clean in her meridians, when she noticed the shape in the shallows. She stopped. She stared. The shape resolved itself, unhelpfully, into a person. Kushina lowered her chain and walked to the bank, her hand already moving toward the kunai at her hip, because 17 years in the ninja world had installed certain reflexes that operated independent of conscious thought. She kept low. She kept quiet. She studied the shape in the water with the sharp-edged attention of someone who had learned that unexpected things at riverbanks were rarely good news. The person was a boy. Or a young man, maybe. It was hard to tell from this angle. He was face down in the shallows, which was bad, but his head was turned sideways, which was slightly less bad. He was breathing. She could see the water moving around his shoulders with each slow exhale. He was wearing clothes that were strange, dark, damaged, layered in a way that suggested they had once been a uniform of some kind, though she could not identify the insignia on what remained of the collar. His hair was blonde, bright, even soaked and plastered to his face, and his skin was tanned in the way of people who spent most of their time outdoors. He was also covered in scars that made no sense for someone his age. Kushina had seen scarring before. She was a ninja. Scars were the vocabulary of their profession, written on skin instead of paper, and she could read them reasonably well. The parallel lines of blade work, the puckered circles of burns, the strange smooth patches that came from chakra-enhanced injuries that had been healed too fast and with too little precision. This boy's scars told a story that she did not have the vocabulary for. There were too many of them. There were old ones and very old ones and some that looked, impossibly, like they might still be healing. She crouched beside him, pressed 2 fingers to the pulse point at the side of his neck. Strong. Steady. His chakra, when she brushed against it with her own sensing ability, was enormous, not the unfocused overflow of a raw talent, but the deep, settled enormity of someone who had been carrying extraordinary power for a very long time and had learned to hold it still. "Hey," she said, loudly. "Hey you. Wake up." "Nothing. I'm not pulling you out of the river," she announced. "I don't know where you've been. The river is right there. You can get up yourself." The boy's breathing continued its slow, even rhythm. Somewhere in the upstream distance, one of the unreasonable birds was making a tremendous amount of noise about the sunrise. Kushina muttered something deeply uncharitable, grabbed a fistful of his collar, and hauled. He came around on the bank, coughing river water and making a sound that she felt slightly bad about having witnessed. She handed him a cloth from her bag. She always carried cloths, because she was always, on some level, planning for disaster, and crouched at a safe conversational distance while he gathered himself. It took a while. He sat up. He pressed the cloth to his face. He breathed the way people breathe when they were relearning how to do it. With concentration, with effort, with the particular deliberateness of someone fighting against something internal that had nothing to do with the river water in his lungs. Then he lowered the cloth, and she saw his face. He was around her age. Maybe slightly older, if she was being generous. His features were broad and open, the kind of face that was probably very easy to read under normal circumstances. Expressive around the eyes and mouth in the way that some people were. The way that said this person does not have much of a poker face. Except that right now his face was doing something complicated and shut down and very, very still in the way that things went still when they were holding too much weight. He had whisker marks, 3 on each cheek. Fine lines slightly raised, the kind of markings she had only ever seen in, well, she had never actually seen them on a person before. She had read about them in the scrolls on Uzumaki clan bloodline documentation that the third Hokage had provided when she first arrived, the ones she had studied obsessively at age 11 trying to find anything in this village that felt like home. Certain seal configurations, applied at birth or before, could leave residual physical markings. Not common. Very old technique. She was staring. She made herself stop. "You're alive," she said, because she had to say something and this seemed like a reasonable starting point. He blinked. His eyes were blue, a very particular shade of blue, not unusual in itself. But the way he was using them right now was strange. He looked at her the way you looked at something you had been trying to remember for a long time and had finally found, and it was both relief and pain in a measure that the face couldn't fully manage at once. "Yeah," he said. His voice was rougher than she expected. Older sounding. "Yeah, where am I?" "Konoha," she said. "Eastern Riverbank. You were face down in the shallows when I found you." She paused. "Did you fall in or?" "I don't know." He said it carefully, in the way people said things carefully when they knew more than they were saying. She filed this away. The last thing I remember is," he stopped. His jaw worked. He pressed the cloth to his face again, briefly, and when he lowered it his eyes were red at the corners in a way that was very deliberately being ignored. "I'm not sure." "What year is it?" she told him. He went very, very still. The bird upstream hit a particularly ambitious note. "Okay," he said to nobody. "Okay." He said it 2 more times, each repetition quieter than the last, in the way of a person having an extremely private conversation with themselves while technically in public. Then he seemed to remember she was there, and his expression cycled through several things very quickly before settling on something that was trying to be normal and not quite succeeding. "Sorry," he said. "I'm sorry. I think I hit my head." "Your head is fine," she said. "I checked." "Oh." He looked slightly surprised that she had checked. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I told you I wasn't going to pull you out and then I pulled you out, so I'm already irritated." She stood, brushing grass from her knees. "What's your name?" He hesitated for exactly half a second too long. "Naruto." "Naruto what?" Another half second. Then, quietly, "Uzumaki." Kushina stared at him. He looked back at her with the expression of a person bracing for something. "Uzumaki," she repeated. "Yeah, you're an Uzumaki." "Yeah." She crossed her arms. She looked at him very carefully. The blonde hair, which was not characteristic of the clan but wasn't impossible. The whisker marks that were absolutely characteristic of specific Uzumaki sealing practices. The chakra signature she had brushed against that had felt, underneath its extraordinary depth, faintly and inexplicably familiar in the way that things felt familiar when they belonged to the same root. "I'm the only Uzumaki in Konoha," she said, because she was, and because she had made peace with this fact at considerable personal expense, and was not inclined to be casual about it being contradicted. "I know," he said. "I mean," he stopped. I've heard. About you. The clan, the settlement records I was trying to," he ran a hand through his wet hair. "I'm from one of the scattered branches. I came to see if," he seemed to realize he was doing terribly at this and stopped talking. Kushina studied him for a long, quiet moment. She was not, she would have told anyone who asked, a soft person. She was loud and direct and had a temper that her academy instructors had described in their reports using words like considerable and in excess of tactical utility. which she privately thought was completely unfair because her temper had never gotten in the way of completing a mission. She was also, underneath all of this, a girl who had been catastrophically lonely for 7 years, who had grown up in the middle of a village that had needed her specifically, and wanted her generally not at all, and who recognized certain things in certain faces without wanting to. She recognized something in this face. "Can you stand?" she asked. "Yes," he said, and then stood up and almost immediately proved himself wrong by swaying significantly. She moved without thinking, catching his arm before he went down. He was heavier than he looked, muscle-heavy, the kind of solid that came from years of the kind of training that didn't leave much room for anything else. She braced, adjusted, and held on. "Sure," she said. "Absolutely standing." "Very convincing." "I'm fine," he said through teeth that were slightly clenched. "You are the least fine person I have pulled out of a river today. And you are the only person I have pulled out of a river today." She did not let go of his arm. "There's a medical station 3 streets over. It's not the hospital, it's just the auxiliary post. But it's staffed this time of morning and they'll—" "No," he said quickly. "No medical, please. I need a minute. I'll be fine in a minute." She looked at him sidelong. His chakra was doing something she hadn't noticed before, something very subtle and very controlled. Cycling, she realized. Healing himself. The cycling was so practiced it was nearly invisible. But she had grown up in a clan that had produced SEAL masters, and she knew the signature of structured self-repair when she was standing next to it. "You're a medic?" she said. "No," he said. Not formally." "Then how are you?" "I'm fine," he said again. And then, because he could apparently feel her skepticism from arm's length away, "I've been hurt worse. I've been hurt a lot worse. This is nothing. I just need to stand still for a second." She let him stand still. She did not let go of his arm. The sun was coming up in earnest now, pushing orange light across the river surface in long, flat lines. A few early birds were doing their morning business in the reeds. Somewhere upstream, someone else was beginning to train. She could hear the distant rhythmic sound of strikes on a practice post, muffled by distance and the movement of water. The boy, Naruto, was looking at the river. His expression had gone somewhere very interior, very far from the bank, and for a moment she could see underneath the careful blankness to something that made her chest hurt in a way she did not fully understand. He looked like someone who had just been told something terrible, and was in the process of deciding whether to believe it. "What happened to you?" she asked. He didn't answer for a moment. "Then everything." "That's not an answer." "I know." He exhaled slowly. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be difficult. He stopped. His jaw worked. "I just need a few minutes to understand where I am, what this is. I need to think." "You can think at the medical station." "I really can't go to the medical station." She studied him. "Are you in trouble?" "Not the kind you mean." "What kind do I mean?" He almost smiled at that. Something flickered in his face, very briefly, that looked like it might have been a smile in better circumstances. "The criminal kind. The running from someone kind." "I'm not." He looked at her directly for the first time since waking up, and the blue of his eyes in the morning light was startling. "I promise. I'm not dangerous. Not to anyone here. Not to you." "I'm not worried about you being dangerous to me," she said, slightly offended. "I'm worried about you falling down again." This time the almost smile became something more recognizable. It changed his face entirely, made it younger, or maybe more accurately made it reveal how young it actually was underneath everything that had been layered over it. "Yeah," he said. "Fair." She took him to her apartment. She would not, later, be entirely able to explain this decision. She had the option of the medical station, which he refused. The option of handing him off to the gate guards, who would have put him in administrative processing for approximately 2 days while they figured out what to do with an apparent amnesiac with an unusual chakra signature, and no verifiable village affiliation, or the option of sending him on his way and washing her hands of the entire situation. None of these felt right. The medical station, he had refused. The gate guards would be both slow and unkind, and sending him away. She had looked at his face and thought about the word scattered, which was what he had said about the clan branches. scattered. She knew what it felt like to be the remaining piece of something that had been scattered, so she took him to her apartment. It was not a large apartment. The village had given it to her when she arrived, a functional, slightly impersonal space on the 4th floor of a building near the academy that she had been gradually and stubbornly personalizing over 7 years until it looked like a place where a person actually lived. There were ceiling diagrams on the walls, half-finished, the kind she worked on when she couldn't sleep. There was a stack of clan texts on the table beside the window. There were training calluses on her hands from work that was not decorative, and she had never pretended otherwise. She put the boy, Naruto, on the couch. She brought him a towel that was actually dry and a change of clothes that were roughly the right size because she had learned early that keeping spare clothes in various sizes was the kind of practical preparation that paid for itself repeatedly. She boiled water. She made tea. She watched him from the kitchen doorway while he sat on her couch looking at the ceiling diagrams on the walls with an expression that she could not identify and was not sure she wanted to. "You can read those?" she asked. "Some of them." He said it without thinking, and then seemed to catch himself. "I've studied ceiling. Some. Those are 4th generation Uzumaki chain barrier notation," she said. "They're not widely circulated." He was quiet for a moment. "I know." He looked at her. "You drew those." It was not a question. She handed him his tea and sat down across from him in the chair she had positioned near the window specifically because it gave her a good view of both the door and the couch. "Old habit." "Yes. I'm working on an adaptation of the containment loop in the 3rd diagram. The original design has a vulnerability in the lower right quadrant when the subject exerts lateral pressure. You close it by inverting the anchor notation," he said, very quietly. "So the pressure reads as interior rather than exterior. The seal tightens instead of expanding." She stared at him. He stared back, and she watched him realize what he had just said and watch his expression go through something that looked, very briefly, like grief. "Sorry," he said. That was." He shook his head. "I don't know why I said that." "Because it's correct," she said. "I figured it out 3 weeks ago. It's the correct solution." She leaned forward slightly. "How do you know that?" That's an extremely specialized problem. Even most Uzumaki wouldn't." "I had a good teacher," he said. "Who?" He looked at her for a long moment. The morning light was full and even through the window now, falling across the couch and across his face, and in it she could see more clearly all the things she had catalogued at the riverbank. The scars, the age in his eyes that didn't match the relative youth of his face, the way he held himself like someone who was carrying something and had been carrying it long enough that they didn't notice the weight anymore. "Someone who's gone," he said. She taught me a lot." Kushina picked up her own tea and drank it, and did not say anything for a moment. "I'm sorry," she said, because whatever she wasn't saying, it was something she recognized. "Thank you," he said, and the way he said it was careful and genuine in equal parts. She let him sleep on the couch. This was not a decision she made consciously so much as a decision that became inevitable by degrees. He drank the tea, and then the sitting upright was clearly costing him more than it looked, and then his head drooped once, twice, and then he was asleep between one breath and the next with the abruptness of someone whose body had simply stopped asking for permission. She caught the teacup before it fell. She looked at him for a long time. Sleeping, he looked younger. The careful blankness left his face, and what was underneath it was something that made her throat feel tight in a way that was inconvenient, and not entirely welcome. He was frowning slightly, even unconscious. Not a distressed frown but a concentrated one, as if he was working very hard on something even in sleep. His hands were loosely open on the cushion beside him, and the scars on his knuckles and forearms were very visible in the morning light. She had not met many people who had that much history written on their skin. She thought about what he had said. "Someone who's gone." "She taught me a lot." The way his voice had gone quiet in the middle of it, not dramatic, not performing anything, just factual in the way that people were factual about things they had made peace with because they didn't have any other choice. She thought about the word Uzumaki, said in her apartment for the first time in years. She thought about the chakra she had sensed in him at the riverbank, that extraordinary, settled depth, and underneath it, something that had felt like recognition, like resonance, as though whatever she carried and whatever he carried were, at their root, made of the same material. She put a blanket over him. She went to her table and sat down and worked on her ceiling diagrams until the rest of the village woke up. He slept for 6 hours. When he woke up, she had made rice and fish, because it was past noon, and she was hungry. And she had made enough for two on the principle that she was going to have a long conversation with him, and it was easier to have long conversations if both parties had eaten. He sat up. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the apartment with the expression of someone recalibrating, remembering where they were, rebuilding the architecture of the current situation around themselves piece by piece. Then he smelled the food, and something in his face did something very sudden and very helpless that she carefully did not acknowledge. "Come eat," she said. He ate. She had never, in 7 years, met another person who ate with quite that degree of commitment and focus. It was not table manners, exactly. There were none. But it was not slovenly either. It was simply genuine, in the way that someone who had been genuinely hungry a lot in their life brought a certain earnestness to the act of eating that other people did not. She found it, against all expectation, very easy to watch. "Thank you," he said, when he was done. This is really good." "Thank you? You said thank you already? It deserves 2 thank yous." She nearly smiled. She did not quite. "Are you going to tell me what actually happened to you?" He looked at his empty bowl. "I told you." "I don't remember clearly. You said that at the river? You've had 6 hours of sleep and you've eaten. And I'm reasonably sure you're not actually amnesiac because you knew exactly what year it was when you were asking, which means you had a reference point. You were checking against something." He was quiet. "I'm not going to report you to the gate division," she said. "I'm not going to turn you in for anything. But you are sitting in my apartment, and I pulled you out of my river, and you know things about Uzumaki's ceiling notation that aren't in any publicly available text, and I would like an explanation that is not a careful partial truth." He looked up at her. She looked back. He had very expressive eyes. She had noticed this before, but it was more apparent now that his face was no longer shut down. They moved with what he was thinking even when the rest of his expression was held. Still, small shifts in the way the light caught them that mapped something of what was happening underneath. Right now they were doing something complicated and tired, and, underneath both of those things, something that looked a great deal like the specific exhaustion of someone who had been carrying a secret for so long that the secret had become structural. Not something separate from them, but something load-bearing, something that the entire architecture of their life was built around. He exhaled. "I can't tell you everything," he said. "I genuinely can't. Not yet. Possibly not ever, depending on." He stopped. "But what I can tell you is that I'm not here to cause trouble. I didn't choose to be here. I don't know exactly how it happened. I know it has something to do with the clan, with the bloodline resonance, the way Uzumaki chakra responds to Uzumaki chakra across." He stopped again. "Across certain conditions. And I know I can't go back." She sat with this. "Can't," she said. "Or won't." "Can't," he said. And then, quieter, "and won't." If both of those are true. She looked at her own bowl. She thought about 7 years ago, a 10-year-old girl getting off a transport that smelled like salt water and looking at a village full of strangers and thinking, "This is it then. This is what there is." She thought about the specific texture of arriving somewhere that was not home and deciding, over time and through great effort, to make it one. "Okay," she said. He blinked. "Okay, you can stay on the couch," she said, "while I figure out what to do with you." She stood, picked up both bowls, took them to the small kitchen. "You'll have to register with the village eventually, but I know the administrative clerk in the civilian records office and she owes me a favor, so I can buy you a few days while you," she gestured vaguely, "sort yourself out." The silence from the other room was very complete. She came back to the doorway and looked at him. He was sitting very still on her couch, looking at her with that expression again. The one she had seen at the riverbank, the one that was too much for a single face to entirely contain. His hands were pressing against his knees. His jaw was doing something careful and controlled. "You don't have to," he said. His voice was very even. "You don't know me. You don't have any reason to. You don't have to do this." "I know that," she said. "I'm doing it anyway, you know?" He blinked. Something flickered across his face, fast, startled, gone. "What?" she said. Nothing, he said. He shook his head. I'll stay out of your way. I'll be useful if I can. I'll earn it, whatever I can do. I didn't ask you to earn anything, she said, more sharply than she intended, because she knew what that was. She knew the shape of that sentence, the defensive pre-apology of it. The I will make myself worth the trouble before you decide to throw me out of it. She had said it herself, at 10, at 12, at 13, in more conversations than she cared to count. He looked at her. You're allowed to just accept help, she said, less sharply. It's fine. It's allowed. A very long moment. Okay, he said. The way he said it was the way she had said this is it, then at 10 years old. Not belief. Exactly. But the beginning of a decision to attempt belief. Good, she said. Now. The shower is down the hall and there are spare towels under the cabinet. Use them. You still smell like river, he laughed. It was sudden and genuine and startled out of him, and it changed his whole face. Made it open up like a window being thrown wide, warm and easy and real in a way that made the apartment feel different for the moment it lasted. It was a good laugh. She stood in the doorway and looked at him and thought, very quietly and without quite meaning to, oh no, right, she said. Shower. Go. He went, still smiling. Kushina stood in the kitchen for a moment. She looked at the 2 bowls in the sink and the extra pair of chopsticks, and the fact that the couch cushion had, somehow, over the course of a single morning, acquired the particular impression of someone who planned to be on it again. She washed the bowls. She did not think about his laugh, or his eyes, or the word Uzumaki said in her apartment for the first time in years. She thought about them anyway. Outside, Konoha was bright and ordinary and full of people going about the business of their lives, none of whom had any idea that something had fallen out of the river that morning, something that had no name in any current scroll or mission briefing, something that belonged to a category of event that the village had not yet invented language for. A boy who had fallen from tomorrow, dripping water on a kitchen floor, learning, for what felt like the first time, what it might mean to stop. The village made up its mind about Naruto Uzumaki before he had been in it for 72 hours. This was not unusual. Konoha was, at its heart, a community of people trained to read situations quickly and assign threat levels with the speed and confidence of professionals who understood that hesitation in the field was a form of dying slowly. The shinobi who populated its streets and its mission halls and its morning training grounds were not a suspicious people so much as an accurate one. They made assessments, and they made them fast, and they updated those assessments only when presented with information compelling enough to demand it. The assessment they made about the blonde boy with the whisker marks and the strange chakra signature was odd. Powerful. Not dangerous. Probably. The probably was doing a significant amount of structural work in that sentence, but it was there, which was something. Kushina had gone to Rin, the administrative clerk in the civilian records office, who owed her a favor from an incident involving a B-rank escort mission, a merchant with a very flexible relationship with the truth, and approximately 9,000 ryo in disputed payment that Kushina had recovered through methods that were technically within mission parameters if you were generous in your definition of technically, and had explained that a distant clan relative had arrived unexpectedly and needed a few days before formal registration. Rin had looked at her steadily for a long moment with the expression of a woman who was processing the subtext of this request with full accuracy, and choosing not to comment on it, and had said 3 days, and that had been that. 3 days. Kushina had a plan for 3 days. She would use the time to determine what, exactly, she had brought home from the river, and then she would decide what to do with it. She had not planned for Naruto to be quite so immediately apparent as a person. He was awake before her the next morning. This was the first surprise. She came out of her bedroom at 5:30 to find him sitting cross-legged on her floor in front of the window, which was open to the pre-dawn air, in a state of meditation so complete and so still that she almost didn't see him. His hands were resting open on his knees. His breathing was slow and even. His chakra, which she had been unconsciously tracking since yesterday with the low-level sensing ability that she kept running at all times the way other people kept a candle burning, was doing something extraordinary. It was cycling through a complex, layered pattern that she recognized as a meditation technique but had never seen executed at this level of precision. Most practitioners of chakra meditation could quiet their flow, bring it to a slow, even hum, like a river reduced to a stream. What Naruto's chakra was doing was more like it was in conversation with itself. Like there were multiple registers of it, and he was holding all of them in deliberate relationships simultaneously. She stood in the doorway and watched him for considerably longer than was strictly necessary for the purpose of determining that he was simply meditating and not, for instance, constructing a seal array on her floor. He came out of it without any particular drama, a long breath, a settling of his shoulders, and then he turned his head and looked at her. "Morning," he said. "How long have you been awake?" she asked. 3 hours, maybe. He rotated his neck slowly, working out something. "I don't sleep much." "How much is not much?" 4 hours. Sometimes 5. He seemed to consider whether this was information he wanted to be sharing and then shrugged slightly, as though the calculus had resolved in favor of honesty by a narrow margin. I had years where I slept less than that, and somewhere along the way my body just adjusted." She came fully into the room. She sat in the chair by the window. The city outside was doing its early morning version of itself, the sky not quite dark, not quite light, that particular gray-blue of the hour before dawn that belonged to the few people who chose to be in it. "You said that like the years weren't good ones," she said. He looked at the window. "Some of them were, and some weren't." "Yeah. Quiet. Some weren't." She pulled her knees up to her chest, which was not her most authoritative posture but was her most comfortable one, and studied him. He looked better this morning than he had yesterday. The hollow quality was still there in his eyes, but it was a little further back, and the extreme stillness of yesterday had softened somewhat. He looked like he had, very slightly, remembered how to occupy the present tense. "What were you doing just now?" she asked. "The chakra work, trying to understand what happened to me." He glanced at her, checking something. "The chakra resonance I mentioned yesterday, between Uzumaki bloodlines. I was trying to map what I could of the signature, how it worked, where it started and what it used as an anchor." He paused. "I think it used you." She felt something tighten, very carefully, in her chest. "Used me how? Not like that. Not invasively. Just," he seemed to be searching for language. "The bloodline resonance needs 2 fixed points. The person traveling and the person they're traveling toward. I think the seal I was carrying, the one I was born with, created a secondary resonance with the person it was keyed to. And when the conditions were right, when I was," he stopped. "When there was nothing else keeping me anchored where I was, another stop. The longest one. I moved toward the resonance instead." She sat with this for a moment. "The seal you were born with," she said carefully. "Yes. Uzumaki seals are keyed to specific clan lines," she said. "A resonance anchor would have to be a specific person. Not just any Uzumaki." He looked at her. She looked at him. "Okay," she said. He exhaled. "You believe me?" "I believe you believe it," she said. "And I believe the chakra mathematics, which checks out better than most of what you haven't told me." She put her feet back on the floor. "Tea?" "Yes," he said. "Please." She made tea. She thought about the word keyed and the word anchor, and what it meant for a seal to recognize a person across time and pull toward them. She thought about bloodline resonance, which she had read about in the clan archives as a theoretical phenomenon, one of the Uzumaki abilities so advanced and so rare that it had been listed in the same section as the truly extraordinary capabilities, the ones that had made other villages afraid of them, in the end. She thought, what kind of seal would a person have to carry for this to work? She thought, what would have to be happening to them for them to have nothing else keeping them anchored? She brought the tea back and did not ask either question out loud. The second surprise was that he was helpful. She had not asked him to be. She had, in fact, explicitly said that he didn't need to earn anything. But she came home from her afternoon training session on the second day to find that he had reorganized the chakra paper on her workbench, which she had told herself was not disorganized but was clearly, in retrospect, disorganized, by notation type, and had marked 3 of her in-progress diagrams with small written observations that were so precisely correct about the problems she had been circling for weeks, that she had to put them down and breathe for a moment. "You can't just," she started. "Sorry," he said immediately. "I shouldn't have touched them. I was trying to, I was just looking and then I saw I'm sorry, the third note, she said. About the pressure variance in the outer containment ring, he stilled. Explain it, she said. He did. He sat down at the other end of the bench and talked through it with the specific fluency of someone who was translating from intuition into language, working to make explicit something that was, for them, simply obvious. The way expert practitioners talked about the foundational principles of their craft, not reciting but thinking aloud. She listened. She asked questions. He answered them. He asked a question back, about a decision she had made in the anchor notation in the second diagram, and she explained her reasoning, and he was quiet for a moment, and then said, "That's better than the way I was taught, actually," with a straightforwardness that was entirely without performance. They worked until past dark. She ordered food. She was not, she would readily admit, a person who cooked with any particular skill or interest, and they ate at the bench surrounded by scrolls and chakra paper and the particular, comfortable disorder of a workspace that had been genuinely used, and she thought, this is strange. This is very strange. Not badly strange, just the kind of strange that you could feel was going to be significant, the way you could feel a storm coming before the first cloud appeared, in the change of pressure in the air. You've been doing this for years, she said. Not a question. Most of my life, he said. I wasn't, it's complicated. I wasn't formally trained until late. Later than most. But I always had a connection to sealing. It made sense to me from the beginning, even before I understood why. He picked up his chopsticks. Sealing is about relationships. About what holds things together. That always made sense to me. What didn't make sense to you? He thought about this. Staying still, he said. For a long time, staying still didn't make sense. I always had to be moving, doing, finding the next thing. He was quiet for a moment. I'm not sure I knew how to just exist somewhere without it being a problem to be solved. And now, he looked around the apartment. At the ceiling diagrams on the walls and the spare chopsticks on the bench and the gray-blue of the window that was the same gray-blue as the morning 2 days ago, when she had found him dripping on her kitchen floor. Getting better at it, he said. The third surprise was the QB. She had known something was off since the first moment she touched his chakra. That strange, resonant familiarity. The sense of the beast stirring in its deep containment when Naruto was near. She had attributed it to the bloodline resonance he had described. But on the third morning, sitting across from him at breakfast, she felt the QB move with a clarity that was not incidental. The beast pressed against its seal from the inside, not aggressively. Not with malice. More the way a very large animal pressed against a fence when it recognized something on the other side. Attention, recognition, the specific movement of something that was interested. She put down her bowl. Naruto, she said. He looked up. The QB knows you, she said. He went very still. The morning light was behind him and she couldn't read his eyes clearly. But she didn't need to. She could read his hands, which pressed flat against the table, and his breathing, which did not change but clearly wanted to. Why would the QB know you? She said. He looked at his bowl. Naruto. It's complicated, he said very quietly. You say that a lot. Because it is. She looked at him steadily. The QB is the reason I'm in this village, she said. The reason my clan sent me here. The reason I have been carrying something since I was 7 years old that I did not choose and cannot put down. She kept her voice even. It cost her. If you have information about that, about the beast, about my seal, about anything related to what I'm carrying, I deserve to know it. He looked up at her then. His expression was the most open she had seen it. All of the careful management he maintained was absent for a moment, stripped back to something underneath that was genuine and tired and, she thought, very old for his age. I know, he said. I know you do. He exhaled. I'm not keeping information about your seal. Your containment is solid. It's extraordinary, actually, you have no idea how good your seal work is, even what you're doing unconsciously, the modifications you've made. It's not in danger. I promise. Then what does the QB recognize in you? A long silence. You're going to have to trust me, he said, that I can't answer that yet. Not because I'm hiding something dangerous. Because the answer changes things. In ways I'm not sure about. He met her eyes. I know that's not enough. I know you have no reason to. Stop, she said. He stopped. Stop finishing that sentence, she said. Every time you're about to say something honest, you follow it up with I know you have no reason to trust me, or I know this isn't enough and I'm telling you to stop doing that. She picked up her bowl. I'll ask you again later. When you're ready. Don't make me ask you a third time. He blinked. Okay, he said. Good. She ate. He ate. The morning went on. The QB settled back into its deep place, quiet again but oriented, the way something oriented toward warmth, without urgency, simply noting, here. This direction. Familiar. On the third day, Minato arrived. She had been expecting this. She should have been better prepared for how it would actually feel to see him standing in her doorway. Handsome and formal in the particular way that Minato was always formal. His jonin vest impeccably straight, his blonde hair neat, his expression carrying that combination of openness and precision that made him excellent in the field and occasionally exhausting in conversation. He was carrying a small wrap package, which meant this was supposed to be a friendly visit and not an official one, which meant she had approximately 30 seconds before it became both. Kushina, he said. I heard you had a house guest. News travels, she said. Konoha is a village, he said, with the slight smile that acknowledged the inevitable nature of small community information networks. Can I come in? She stepped back. He came in. Naruto was at the workbench. He had been there since breakfast, working on a modification to the fifth diagram that they had argued about pleasantly for half an hour the previous evening. He looked up when Minato entered, and something happened in his expression that Kushina had never seen there before. Not fear, exactly, but the specific arrested quality of someone who has prepared for a moment, and is now discovering that preparation is entirely inadequate to the actuality. He looked at Minato the way someone looked at a photograph they had studied for years and were now seeing in 3 dimensions. Minato, to his credit, noticed. He noticed everything. It was one of his better qualities and his more annoying ones in equal measure. He looked at Naruto with the calm, assessing attention of a jonin who had learned to read people as a professional matter. And something shifted in his expression that was subtle enough that Kushina would have missed it if she hadn't known his face very well. You must be the distant relative, Minato said pleasantly. I'm Namikaze Minato. I teach at the academy. I'm a friend of Kushina's. I know, Naruto said. His voice was very controlled. I've heard of you. Your reputation. Minato's eyes moved between Kushina and Naruto with the speed and efficiency of someone updating an assessment in real time. Uzumaki Naruto, he said, and it was technically a confirmation but felt more like the thing you said when you were filing information carefully. Yes, Naruto said. Interesting name. Minato set the wrap package, which turned out to be mochi, which Kushina knew was calculated because she had made the mistake of mentioning her preference for mochi in his presence several months ago, and Minato had filed it away with the thoroughness of someone who filed everything away. You share it with Kushina's favorite particle, the spiral. Uzumaki. I know, Naruto said. My mother. He stopped. Something compressed in his face. Someone important to me named me after it. Minato was quiet for a moment. What brings you to Konoha? He's clan, Kushina said, from the kitchen doorway. He's been abroad. He came to see if there were others. She met Minato's eyes with the expression that she had developed over 7 years of people asking her questions she did not want to answer. Calm, certain, go no further. Is this a social visit? Completely, he said, and smiled. I just wanted to make sure everything was settled. Everything is settled, she said. Thank you for the mochi. He left. He did so gracefully, which was his way, pausing at the door to say something pleasant about the morning weather and make a specific but not pushy mention of the academy demonstration happening on the weekend that he hoped she might attend. He did not push. He did not demand. He was, as always, extremely good at the particular restraint of a person who knew exactly where the line was and chose, on this occasion, not to cross it. The door closed. Kushina and Naruto were quiet for a moment. He doesn't trust me, Naruto said. He doesn't distrust you, she said. That's different. With Minato, distrust sounds like something specific. What he just did was file you. Naruto made a sound that might have been a laugh, hollow at the edges. Yeah. He turned back to the workbench. Yeah, that's a good word for it. She looked at his back. At the way his shoulders were held very carefully. Too carefully, the way you held yourself when you were working to not reveal something that was working very hard to be revealed. He's someone important to you too, she said. Naruto's hand, which had been moving to pick up a brush, stopped. In the complicated way, she continued. The way things are complicated for you. Yes, he said, after a moment. Okay, she said. He turned to look at her. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. The morning light through the window was doing its thing, turning the apartment into something warmer than its actual dimensions, making the ceiling diagrams on the walls look like they belonged there, like the room had been arranged specifically to hold this kind of life. She stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed and her hair down because she hadn't braided it yet, and she looked back at him with the direct attention she brought to everything, which she had been told was occasionally intimidating, which she had never seen the need to moderate. Can I ask you something? He said. You can ask me anything, she said. I reserve the right to not answer. Fair. He leaned against the bench. What are you getting from this? Keeping me here, covering for me with Rin, working with me on the diagrams. What do you? He seemed to be trying to phrase it correctly and settling for imperfect. People don't usually do things like this for strangers. She considered him. She considered the honest version of the answer, which was complicated, and the simpler version, which was true but incomplete, and decided on something between the two. I was 10 when I came to this village, she said. I spoke a different dialect. I had a different way of moving, different food preferences, different everything. I was here because the clan sent me here and the village needed something that I happened to carry inside my body. And neither of those things were about me as a person. She looked at the ceiling diagrams on her walls. Nobody hurt me. Nobody was cruel. They were just, I was useful in a specific way, and outside of that specific way, I was unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things require effort, and people have limited effort. She brought her eyes back to his. I know what it looks like when someone falls into a place where they don't belong, and has to figure out whether it can become somewhere they do. She paused. And I know what it looks like when someone is carrying something heavy enough to change the way they sleep. He was very quiet. You dream badly, she said. I can hear it. Not words, just the sound of someone fighting something in their sleep. He looked at his hands. I didn't know that. You didn't wake up, she said. That's different. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the apartment resettled around them, the sounds of the street below filtering up. The distant measured sounds of the academy grounds where students were beginning their morning forms. The birds that were always somewhere near her window for reasons she had never fully identified but had stopped questioning. I lost everyone, he said finally. Not the way you're thinking. Not dead. Not most of them. Just gone. In a way that I can't. The place I came from doesn't exist in the same way anymore. The people I knew, they're different. Or they're going to be different. Or they haven't been born yet. He exhaled. It's very hard to explain. Then don't explain it, she said. Not today, Kushina. Not today, she said again, firmly. Today you finish the modification on the 5th diagram because your solution is good, but the anchor notation in the lower left is going to create a lateral pressure problem, in exactly the same way the original Uzumaki chain barrier did, and I would like to point out the irony of that before you complete the mistake. He blinked. Then he laughed. The same sudden, undefended laugh as 2 days ago, warm and real and a little bit helpless. The one that opened his face all the way up. He started, and stopped, and shook his head. What? She said. Nothing, he said. Just. You're kind of amazing, you know? She felt heat move up her face, which was annoying. She turned back toward the kitchen with great dignity, and the specific briskness of a person who had not just been told something that landed somewhere. Tender. The anchor notation? Lower left. Fix it. Yes, ma'am, he said, still smiling. She heard it in his voice. The smile. She did not look back. On the 4th day, she took him to register. The formal process was, as administrative processes went, relatively painless, made easier by the fact that Rin, true to her word, had prepared the paperwork in advance with the careful ambiguity of a clerk who had learned that sometimes the kindest thing documentation could do was decline to ask specific questions. Naruto signed where he was told to sign, answered the questions he was asked with answers that were not technically untrue, and received, at the end of an hour, a temporary resident identification and a provisional village pass that would allow him to move around Konoha without the guest escort that non-registered visitors technically required. He held the identification card for a moment after they stepped out of the office. Just looked at it. Okay? She asked. Yeah, he said. He sounded, she thought, more surprised than he should have been. Like a person receiving something they had not actually believed they would receive. Yeah. I've had papers before. I had a headband before. I had a lot of things that said I was, he stopped. This is different. How? He looked up from the card. They were standing on the office steps in the mid-morning sun, and Konoha was doing what it did on good mid-morning days. Moving and ordinary and full of itself. The sounds of the market, and the academy, and the distant training grounds layered together into the particular ambient sound of a village that didn't think anything particularly historical was happening today. He looked at all of it. This one has your address on it, he said. She felt the thing in her chest again, the tightening that was not quite pain and not quite the opposite of it. She was going to have to do something about that. She was going to have to figure out what it was and address it with the same direct practicality she brought to everything else, because she was not the kind of person who allowed unclear situations to remain unclear, and this situation was becoming very unclear indeed. Later, she decided. She would address it later. She was good at later. Later was where she put most of the things that required more processing than the present moment allowed. Don't read too much into it, she said. It's a temporary pass. Minato is going to start actually investigating your background within the week, I'd estimate, which means you need to have a story, he said. A better one than you have currently, she said. Which is essentially held together with very good chakra sensing and the fact that the Hokage has larger problems this month. She started walking. You're good at sealing. You could be a private apprentice. Someone sent you to study the Uzumaki lines techniques as documented in the village archives before the Yuzushio. She stopped herself. Before what happened to Yuzushio? He had stopped walking. She turned. He was standing still on the path, the resident card in his hand, and his expression was doing the thing again. The thing she was starting to recognize as the face he made when something touched directly on the part of him that he was protecting most carefully. The deep structural wound under all the careful management. Naruto, she said. I know what happened to Yuzushio, he said. Very quietly. I know everything that happened to it. I know what happened to the clan. He looked at his hands. I'm sorry. I know this is your home. Was your home? I'm not. She walked back to him. She stood in front of him and waited until he looked at her. Yes, she said. It was my home. She said it plainly, the way she said all plainly sad things, without softness but without hardness either, just fact, just the solid weight of a true thing. And it's gone and the people in it are gone and I think about it every day and it doesn't stop hurting. She held his gaze. But you didn't do it. And you knowing about it doesn't make it worse. And you standing there looking like you're apologizing for existing isn't useful to either of us, you know? He exhaled. Yeah, he said. So, she said. We will make you a story. You came from a scattered branch. You studied sealing under a private master. You came to Konoha because it has the most complete archive of Uzumaki documentation remaining anywhere in the shinobi nations, which happens to be true and easy to verify. She started walking again. It won't stand up to a deep investigation, but it will stand up to a surface one, and a surface one is all we need to buy you time. He fell into step beside her. After a moment he said, You've done this before. Made up stories for people who needed them, protected people who showed up out of nowhere. She thought about this. No, she said. Not before you. She thought about it a little longer. But I've needed it. So I knew how it worked. He was quiet beside her. They walked through the late morning, through the ordinary sounds of the village doing its ordinary things around them, and she was aware, with the low-level physical awareness of a sensor type who could not fully turn this off even when she wanted to, of his chakra moving beside hers. deep and warm and enormous, and underneath all of it, carrying that strange familiar resonance that the beast in her seal recognized and oriented toward like a compass finding north. Later, she told herself again. Figure out what this is later. Thank you, he said. The same as before, genuine, careful, like someone learning a language one word at a time. For all of this. I know I say it a lot. But I mean it. I know you mean it, she said. That's why I keep letting you say it. They turned onto the street that led back toward her building, and the morning opened up around them, and the whisker marks on his cheeks caught the light in a way that was very old and very specific, and she walked beside the boy who had fallen out of her river and did not think about the thread that the clan text described, the red thread of resonance, the Uzumaki principle that held that bloodline chakra sought its own kind across any distance, any condition, any obstacle the world placed between two people of the same root. She did not think about it. She thought about it entirely. That night, she sat at her workbench after he had settled on the couch, and she opened the clan text she had been avoiding for the 3 years she had owned it. The one on bloodline resonance, the one she had put at the bottom of the stack because it hurt to read, in the way the most accurate things sometimes hurt to read. She found the passage she was looking for. The resonance phenomenon, it read, is not arbitrary. Uzumaki sealing tradition holds that a sufficiently powerful seal, key to a specific bloodline, will generate a resonance signature corresponding not to the nearest Uzumaki but to the most significant one. The anchor of the resonance is not proximity. It is not frequency of contact. It is, and the old scholars disagreed substantially on the precise word, it is necessity. The seal moves toward the person it most requires. She read this twice. She read it a third time. She looked at the couch where Naruto was sleeping, where he was, for once, sleeping quietly, without the sounds of fighting she had heard the first 2 nights. She thought about a seal that moved across time toward the person it most required. She thought about his face when he had seen hers at the river. She closed the book. She went to bed. She did not sleep particularly well, but for different reasons than usual. In the morning, she would ask him nothing. She would make tea and work on the diagrams and let the day be what it was. She had learned, at some cost, that the most important things did not need to be rushed toward. They arrived at their own pace, in their own time, with the patience of something that had already survived the distance it took to reach you. She had 7 years of practice at making a home out of an unfamiliar place. She suspected, without yet knowing what to do with the suspicion, that she was about to have company in that practice. That the boy on the couch was going to stop being a stranger. That this was not going to be simple. That it was, already inevitable. Minato Namikaze was not, by nature, a jealous person. He had examined this quality in himself with the same methodical honesty he brought to all self-examination, and he was reasonably confident that it was true. He was competitive. That was different, and he acknowledged it freely. He was ambitious, in the particular way of people who had been told since childhood that they were exceptional and had then spent considerable years determining whether that assessment was accurate, or simply flattering. He was proud. He was, occasionally, certain of things he had not fully earned the right to be certain of. But jealous, no. Jealousy was a fundamentally reactive quality, and Minato preferred to operate from a position of initiative. Jealousy required you to respond to someone else's actions. Minato, as a rule, acted first. He was telling himself all of this very firmly on a Tuesday morning, standing in the mission hall reviewing a C-rank escort assignment he had already read 3 times without retaining a single word, while in his peripheral vision Kushina walked through the mission hall with the blonde boy, Naruto, at her shoulder, laughing at something he had said, not jealous, concerned. Professionally. Tell me about the boy, Minato said. He said it to Kakashi, who was sitting across from him at the small table in the Jonin break room that nobody called the Jonin break room, but that was where all the Jonin broke. Kakashi was 14 and technically not yet a Jonin, but had been treated as one for over a year by everyone including the Jonin themselves, which was either a tremendous compliment or a sign of some institutional failure that nobody had gotten around to addressing. He was eating a rice ball and reading something that he kept angled away from Minato's line of sight. What boy? Kakashi said, with the specific quality of I know exactly what boy and I am choosing to make you say it. Kushina's, the new resident. The Uzumaki, Naruto. Kakashi turned a page. He's been in the village 10 days. He's registered as a civilian. He's staying with Kushina. A pause. You know all of this already. I know what the registration says, Minato said. That's not the same thing. Kakashi looked up from his book with the expression he had developed specifically for situations where Minato was being more transparent than he thought he was. It was a slight tilt of the head, a very small adjustment around the visible eye. You want me to investigate him. I want you to tell me your impression of him. You've trained near them twice this week. I train where I train, Kakashi said. It's not surveillance. I know that. But you're asking me to use it as surveillance. I'm asking you for a professional impression. Kakashi set down the rice ball. He was quiet for a moment in the way he was quiet when he was actually thinking rather than performing thinking. Still, not theatrical about it, just genuinely processing. He's skilled, he said. More than his registration should suggest. His chakra control is a pause. It's strange. It's better than mine. It's better than yours, sensei, at a technical level. Not stronger, technically cleaner. He picked up the rice ball again. He doesn't show it off. He keeps his levels at something that looks like a capable civilian, or a low-ranked shinobi. But I've seen him slip twice, when he was concentrating on the ceiling work he does with Kushina, and what's underneath is significant. Minato absorbed this. Dangerous? No, Kakashi said, with the confidence of someone who had good threat assessment. Not toward anyone here. When I look at his chakra directly, and he noticed when I did, which is itself notable, it's clean, protective. Like someone who has spent a very long time developing power specifically to not hurt people with it. He looked at Minato with the eye. He's not a threat. You're very certain for 10 days of proximity. I'm very certain because I'm good at this, Kakashi said, without arrogance, just accuracy. And because Kushina is good at this too, and Kushina is, she's not careless. She doesn't take people in, she doesn't. He looked back at his book. The fact that she has his information. Minato was quiet. Also, Kakashi said, turning a page, he knows things about sealing that I haven't seen documented anywhere in the village archive. He and Kushina have been working together every day and from what I can observe the work is genuinely innovative. He's contributing to her research in a meaningful way. A pause. You could ask her about it directly. She'd probably tell you. Kushina is many things but she's not deceptive. I know that, Minato said. Then you know the most likely explanation for why she's not telling you more is that she doesn't know more. Kakashi closed his book. Or that the knowing more is not hers to share. He stood. Professional impression. He's a mystery with good intentions and extraordinary chakra who makes Kushina laugh. I don't know what to do with him either. I suspect that's okay. He left. Minato sat alone with his unread mission brief and thought about the things Kakashi had not said, which were sometimes more useful than the things he had. The QB was becoming a problem, not a crisis. Kushina was too skilled for it to be a crisis, her containment too clean, her relationship with the seal too sophisticated for a simple failure. But the beast had been pressing against its boundaries with an irregular frequency that had begun appearing in her weekly seal check reports approximately 12 days ago, which was, Kushina counted, very deliberately, approximately 12 days after Naruto had arrived. She was sitting in the seal examination room at the hospital, which was where she came once a week for the standard monitoring that the third Hokage had established as protocol after her arrival, and the medic Nin on duty was doing her documentation without looking up. And Kushina was looking at the ceiling and thinking about coincidence, and about the difference between correlation and causation, and about the fact that she knew the difference, and that the difference, in this case, did not seem to be doing very much work. The irregularity is mild, the medic said. Still well within the outer parameters we established. Nothing you need to do differently. She made a notation. Have you had any unusual stress recently? Elevated combat, significant chakra expenditure, emotional. No, Kushina said. Any unusual proximity to another significant chakra source? A pause. Define significant, Kushina said. The medic looked up. She was a woman in her 50s named Kazue, who had been monitoring Kushina's seal for 7 years and who had developed, over those years, A completely unambiguous read on when Kushina was answering a question differently than she was answering it. Uzumaki-san, she said, with the specific patience of a medical professional who has learned that patients did not always volunteer the most relevant information. If there's a factor I should know about, there's a factor, Kushina said. She sat up. There's another Uzumaki in the village. A distant relative. He arrived recently. He's staying with me. Kazue was very still for a moment. Another Uzumaki. Yes. Staying with you. Yes. And his chakra is significant, Kushina said, which was the understatement of the year. Yes. Kazue set down her pen. She looked at Kushina with the look that said, there is a great deal of information in what you are not saying, and I am a professional and I am not going to push, but I want you to understand that I have noticed. Bloodline resonance can affect the seal, Kazue said. Two Uzumaki in sustained close proximity, depending on the strength of both signatures, can create a sympathetic vibration in active sealing work. It's documented. It's not dangerous. She paused. As long as the resonance is stable. It's stable, Kushina said. You're certain? She thought about 11 nights of his chakra moving beside hers in the apartment. About the QB pressing against the seal with the specific orientation of something recognizing something else. About the text she had read and the passage she had not been able to stop thinking about for 12 days. The seal moves toward the person it most requires. I'm working on certain, she said. Kazue looked at her for a moment longer. Then she picked up her pen. Weekly monitoring, she said. If the irregularity increases, we escalate to the Hokage. I know the protocol, Kushina said. I know you know it, Kazue said. I'm saying it anyway, because the Hokage will want to know about the other Uzumaki regardless. And it will be better if the information comes from you. Kushina left the examination room and stood in the hospital corridor for a moment with her back against the wall, and her eyes closed, running through the problem with the clean, honest attention she brought to difficult sealing equations. Laying it out flat. Looking at all the components. The QB knew Naruto. The seal was responding to his presence. The bloodline text described a resonance that moved toward necessity. She had 12 days of evidence, and a medic's professional assessment, and the memory of the beast pressing against its containment with the specific quality of recognition. She opened her eyes. She went to the Hokage's office. The third Hokage received her in the late afternoon, which was the time of day when his office took on the particular quality of lived-in authority. The pipe smoke and the document piles in the afternoon, light through the broad windows. He was a man she had come to trust not easily but genuinely, over 7 years, in the way you came to trust someone who had never made you a promise they didn't keep and never kept a secret they didn't have to. She told him about the QB's irregularity. She told him about the timeline. She told him about Naruto, the chakra, the sealing knowledge, the things he had said and the things he had not said. She told him about the bloodline resonance text and the passage she had memorized. She did not tell him what she suspected, because she was not yet fully certain what she suspected, and she did not deal in half-formed things. The Hokage listened. He smoked his pipe. His face, which was the face of a man who had seen most things and been surprised by fewer than he expected, did something quiet and complex and very still. Bring him to me, he said, when she finished. Not officially. Not through the gate division or the mission office. Bring him here. He looked at her. Tomorrow morning. Before the day staff arrives. You believe me, she said. I believe you've told me exactly what you know and held back exactly what you're uncertain of, he said, which was not the same thing as what she had asked but answered it more precisely. That's consistent with your record. He set down his pipe. Uzumaki-san. The QB seal has been in my care, in Konoha's care, for most of your life. Any factor that affects it is my responsibility to understand. I know, she said, and any factor that affects you, he said more quietly, is my responsibility to understand. She looked at him. Tomorrow morning, he said. Early. She told Naruto that evening. She had expected. She was not entirely sure what she had expected. Some version of resistance, perhaps. The instinct to run that she would have had in his position, the careful assessment of exits that she had learned young and retained. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "Okay, just that." Just a single word, simple and resolved. "You're not worried?" she said. I'm a lot of things, he said. Worried is in there somewhere. He set down the brush he had been using on the 7th diagram, which they had reached that afternoon. But I knew this was coming. I knew I couldn't, he exhaled. I've been here almost 2 weeks and I haven't had to answer for any of it yet. That's longer than I expected. How long did you expect? Maybe 3 days. A slight pause. You're very effective. Don't say it like it's a surprise. I'm not surprised. He looked at her. I know how effective you are. She held that for a moment. The apartment was doing its evening thing. The day's warmth still in the walls, the lamps low, the scrolls and diagrams arranged around them in the comfortable disorder of a workspace that had been genuinely inhabited. It had been 2 weeks and the space had already reorganized itself around 2 people, which was something she noticed without knowing what to do with. He's going to ask you things I've been careful not to ask, she said. I know. You're going to have to give him more than you've given me. I know. He was quiet. Kushina. What? He looked at his hands. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever comes out of it, I want you to know that I haven't lied to you. About anything. I've left things out. I've been careful about what I said. But everything I've told you has been true. She studied him. I know that, she said. He looked up. Something in his expression shifted. The same surprised quality he got sometimes when she said things that he apparently had not expected. She was beginning to think it said something specific, that particular quality of surprise, that it pointed at something about what he had learned to expect from people and how different she apparently was from it. Go to sleep, she said. You'll need your head working tomorrow. He went. She stayed up for another 2 hours working on the 8th diagram, which was the most technically demanding of the set and was also, she realized around midnight, the one that bore most directly on the structure of containment seals, on the question of how you built something that held a vast, living force inside a person without breaking either the force or the person. She worked on it until the answer felt right. The Hokage's office in the early morning was a different room than the Hokage's office in the day. Without the staff and the petitioners and the ordinary machinery of village governance moving through it, it was simply a room, large, old, full of the accumulated presence of the people who had worked in it. The chairs were worn in specific places. The windows were thick. The morning light came through at an angle that made the document stacks look almost deliberate. Naruto stood in the center of it and looked at the 3rd Hokage, and the 3rd Hokage looked at Naruto, and Kushina stood to the side with her arms crossed and watched both of them assess each other. Sit down, the Hokage said. Both of you. They sat. He lit his pipe, which she had learned meant he was settling in for something long and real and not going to be rushed. He looked at Naruto for a long time without speaking, in the way he had of looking at people that felt less like scrutiny than like reading, like he was finding where the honest places were and deciding where to begin. Your chakra is unusual, he said. In a specific way that I would like to understand. I can explain some of it, Naruto said. Start there. A silence. Then, I carry 2 chakra signatures. My own and a second one. Suppressed. It's not an intrusion. It's more like a layer. A foundation I'm built on. He met the Hokage's eyes. You know about the Kyuubi. I know about the Kyuubi in the context you're standing in, the Hokage said carefully. I have a relationship with it, Naruto said. A long-standing one. It's why the beast in Kushina's seal is responding to my presence. We have a history. The Hokage was very still. A history, he repeated. Yes. You're not its host. Not currently, Naruto said. No. Kushina watched the Hokage process this. She watched him move through several responses and choose none of them and arrive at the next question, which was the most precise one. Were you? Naruto looked at him steadily. Yes. The room was very quiet. And that's no longer the case, the Hokage said. It's complicated, Naruto said, and she heard the shadow of a wry note in his voice, brief and self-aware, acknowledging how often he said this. The situation I came from, the timeline, it was different. The Kyuubi's containment was handled differently. I was the host. We worked something out, the fox and I, over many years. The relationship became, not simple, but functional, productive, eventually. He paused. When I arrived here, that history came with me. The The fox in Kushina's seal can sense it. It's recognizing, not me as I am now. Me as I was. Or, the trace of the relationship. It's hard to explain clearly. Try, the Hokage said, Naruto thought. When a seal has been significantly altered, worked with, rebuilt, deepened over years, it leaves traces. Like how you can tell someone has done extensive sealing work by the state of their chakra pathways. The QB spent a long time in contact with my chakra specifically. That leaves a mark on both of us. The beast in Kushina's seal is recognizing that mark. He looked at his hands. It's not dangerous to her. If anything, the relationship I had with the fox. It's essentially a proof that the beast can be worked with. It's not purely hostile. It remembers something about me that was cooperative. That's why it orients toward me rather than agitating. The Hokage smoked his pipe. How did you come to be here, he said. Not a question, exactly. More like an invitation. Naruto was quiet for a long moment. The bloodline resonance, he said. The Uzumaki phenomenon. When I had nothing left anchoring me where I was. When I had lost, he stopped. He started again. Uzumaki sealing has a resonance principle. Two blood relatives in proximity create a sympathetic vibration. But there's another version of it, rarer, more extreme, that can move across significant distances. Temporal ones. He looked at the Hokage directly. I know how that sounds. It sounds like what Kushina described to me, the Hokage said. Continue. I was anchored here. By the seal I carry, the one I was born with. He paused again. It keyed to Kushina. Her specifically. When I had nothing else, it moved toward her. He set his hands flat on the table, the gesture she had seen him use when he was making himself be very clear. I didn't choose this. I didn't know it was possible. I woke up in the river and I understood what had happened, and I understood that I couldn't go back. Can't or won't, the Hokage said. Both, Naruto said. The same way Kushina asked? Both. The Hokage was quiet for a very long time. He smoked his pipe. He looked at Naruto with the deep, unhurried attention of a very old, very experienced man confronting something that required real thought rather than fast response. Kushina waited. She was good at waiting when it mattered. You know things, the Hokage said finally, about this village's future. Yes, Naruto said. Things that could harm people if known. Yes. And things that could protect people if known. A pause. Possibly. I don't. The situation I came from is different enough that I'm not certain what applies and what doesn't. Timelines aren't. They don't map cleanly. The Hokage nodded slowly. I'm going to ask you one question, he said, and I need you to answer it honestly, because my decision about what to do with you rests on it. All right, Naruto said. Is Konoha safe with you in it? Naruto met his eyes. Yes, he said. Simply, entirely, without qualification or hesitation. I would die before I let anything hurt this village. I would die before I let anything hurt. He stopped. Yes, you have my word. The Hokage looked at him for another long moment. Then he looked at Kushina. She gave him the look she gave him when she was saying I've assessed this thoroughly, and I'm standing by it. Which was a look she had developed over years and that he had learned to read with reasonable accuracy. He looked back at Naruto. You'll report to me weekly, he said. Informally. As a checkpoint. He set down his pipe. You'll continue your work with Uzumaki-san, the sealing research. I've seen the preliminary reports Kushina filed and the work has genuine merit. He folded his hands. If you come across information that you believe presents a specific and actionable danger to this village, you'll tell me. Not everything you know. I understand the complexity. But the actionable things. Yes, Naruto said. And you'll be patient, the Hokage said, with the particular weight of someone who understood precisely how much that cost some people. This situation requires patience. From all of us. I know, Naruto said. Good. He looked at Kushina again, briefly, with the expression she had learned to read as, I'm relying on your judgment, and I want you to know I know that I'm relying on it. You can both go. They went. In the hallway outside, Naruto stopped. He put his back against the wall and breathed slowly, and she stood across from him, and waited. He didn't ask everything he knows, Naruto said. No, she agreed. He figured out more than I told him. He usually does, she said. He's been doing this for a very long time. What did he figure out? Naruto asked. She thought about what the Hokage had looked like when Naruto said the seal keyed to Kushina. The specific quality of his stillness, not surprise exactly, but the settling of something into place. The way his eyes had moved between the two of them afterward, briefly and quietly, with the expression of a man filing something under significant but not my information to act on. He figured out enough, she said. Naruto looked at her. She looked back. Come on, she said. There's work to do on the 8th diagram. He followed her out of the Hokage's building into the morning, and the village moved around them, ordinary and loud and entirely unaware of the conversation that had just happened in the quiet room above them. She walked, and he walked beside her, his chakra moving alongside hers in the way it moved now, naturally, like something that had found its proper spacing. Kushina, he said. What? Thank you. For going with me. He seemed to find the right word. For standing in there. I stand where I stand, she said. I know. A pause. That's why it matters. She did not look at him. She looked at the street ahead, at the ordinary Konoha morning, at the path back to the apartment, and the diagrams and the work they did side by side every day in the comfortable disorder of a space that had reorganized itself around two people. Don't read into it, she said. Sure, he said, and she could hear the smile in it. I'm serious. Completely serious, he agreed, still smiling. Naruto. Kushina. She stopped walking. She turned to face him, with the direct, unmodulated attention she brought to things she was not going to be casual about. He met her eyes with the particular quality he had when he wasn't managing anything, open, warm, very blue. I don't know what this is, she said, precisely and honestly. I don't know what this is. I know what the text says about the resonance. I know what the Kyuubi is doing. I know what the Hokage noticed in that room and didn't say. She looked at him steadily. I don't know what I know yet. I'm working on it. He was quiet. So don't, she said, smile at me like that when I'm trying to think clearly. It's inconvenient. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he did the thing he did sometimes. Not the performed smile, not the front, but the real one. Quiet and warm and a little undone. Okay, he said. I'll work on it. Good, she said. She turned and walked. He fell into step beside her. The morning continued around them, indifferent and bright. Somewhere in the Hokage's office, Hiruzen Sarutobi sat with his pipe and his thoughts, and the specific problem of a boy who had arrived in Konoha from a direction that existing village documentation had no category for, who carried a seal older than any currently practiced, who looked at Kushina Uzumaki with the particular quality of someone who was trying, very hard, not to look at her the way he actually wanted to look at her. He was old enough to recognize that kind of trying. He was wise enough to know what it usually meant. He smoked his pipe and looked at the village out his window and thought, well, some things moved at their own pace. You could either trust that pace or you could interfere with it. He had interfered with enough things in his years to know when to leave something alone. He left it alone. The mission was supposed to be simple. This was, in Kushina's experience, the thing missions said about themselves right before they became complicated. Simple was a mood that C-ranks wore on the first morning, before the variables accumulated and the gap between the briefing and the reality widened into something you had to cross carefully and on foot. She had learned this at 13 on her first solo mission and had been relearning it at intervals ever since, and she was still, apparently, capable of being surprised by it, because she had looked at the mission scroll that Tuesday morning and thought, simple. Good. Like someone who had forgotten the lesson. The mission was to escort a civilian cartographer to a location 2 days' travel southeast of Konoha, where he needed to complete survey work on a disputed land boundary before a legal process concluded in 30 days. The cartographer was named Daichi. He was 61, meticulous, frequently cold despite reasonable weather, and had very specific opinions about the correct way to pack surveying equipment that he had shared at length during the first hour of travel. The route was established. The area had been swept twice in the preceding month. The risk assessment was low. Naruto had been added to the team at the last moment. This was the Hokage's doing. She recognized the careful hand of it. Naruto had been integrated into the mission roster quietly, as a supporting member of her 2-person escort team, listed in the documentation as a civilian sealing specialist accompanying the primary escort for research purposes. It was the kind of thing that looked administrative and was actually something else. An opportunity, she understood, for the Hokage to observe how Naruto performed outside the village, under conditions that weren't controlled. She had not told Naruto this. She did not think he would be surprised. They left at dawn on a Wednesday, and everything was fine for approximately 36 hours. The ambush was competent. That was the word she reached for, afterward. Not sophisticated, not overwhelming, but competent in the way that was actually more dangerous than either of those things. Because competent meant someone had looked at the situation carefully and developed a response that was specifically designed for it. 3 teams of 2, positioned at the points of a loose triangle around the route's choke point. The timing was good, late afternoon, the light at the angle that created the most useful shadow. The target was Daichi, whose survey work would, she realized too late, affect someone's financial interests significantly enough to warrant this level of response. She took the first 2 before they finished deploying. The third team split, one holding Daichi at blade point, one engaging Naruto. She had not seen Naruto fight before. She was dealing with her own situation. The third enemy, a wire user who was better than expected, which demanded the kind of full attention response that didn't leave room for peripheral observation. But she was a sensor type, and her sensing didn't require her eyes. And what she felt in Naruto's chakra during the 60 seconds of the engagement was something she filed immediately, and thought about for days. Afterward, he was completely controlled. Not in the tense way of someone managing their power carefully because they were worried about the scenes showing. In the settled way of someone who had long ago finished the work of understanding their own capacity, and was now operating comfortably inside it. His chakra didn't spike. It didn't flood. It moved precisely, economically, doing exactly what was needed and nothing additional, and the enemy it was directed at, a Jonin-level shinobi, by the chakra signature, nothing minor, was neutralized in under a minute. She finished her own engagement, checked Daichi, assessed the scene. All 6 opponents were down. None were dead. Naruto had tied his with chakra-reinforced wire that was so cleanly applied it looked professional. She looked at him. He looked back, slightly flushed from exertion, otherwise entirely composed. You could have ended that faster, she said. I know, he said. You were calibrating. Yes. She looked at the tied enemy. At the wire work, which was excellent. At the total absence of collateral anything. You've done that for years, she said. Fighting below your level. It's good practice, he said, which was true and also not the complete reason, and they both knew it. She let it go. She handled the post-engagement documentation in her field book, sent a message bird to Konoha, and got Daichi, who was shaking but functional, the particular resilience of civilians who had spent their lives in countries adjacent to ninja business, back onto the road toward the survey site. Everything was fine. They reached the site with enough light remaining to set up camp properly, which Kushina did with the systematic efficiency of someone who had been camping on missions since she was 12 and had strong opinions about perimeter seal placement, and fire positioning and the spatial relationship between sleeping areas and the nearest available water source. Naruto helped without being asked and without getting in the way, which was a specific skill she appreciated. Some people helped in a way that actually required additional management, their assistance creating more work than their inaction would have. But Naruto had the quality of someone who assessed what was needed, and filled the actual gap rather than the theoretical one. He put the perimeter seals where she would have put them. He positioned the water supply correctly. He did not put the bedrolls too close to the fire. Daichi ate his dinner, complained about his knees, and fell asleep with the thoroughness of a 61-year-old who had had a very difficult afternoon. Kushina and Naruto sat by the fire. The night was clear. The forest around them was doing its nighttime version, settled, not silent, full of the sounds that living things made when they were not alarmed. She had been thinking about the ambush, about the wire work, about the careful calibration of his power output, and what it implied about how long he had been doing it. How old were you, she said, when you first had to fight seriously? He looked at the fire. 12. That's when most of us start. Not the way I mean seriously. He was quiet for a moment. I mean fighting things that were trying to, that weren't pulling their punches. Things that would have, he stopped. I was 12 the first time I thought I was going to die. She looked at him sidelong. What happened? A mission went wrong. His voice was level, which meant he had made peace with this particular memory, or at least had developed a working relationship with it. We were escorting someone. The threat assessment was low. It wasn't. She thought about a C-rank mission that had turned into something else. She thought about 12 years old. Your team? My team was there, he said. My sensei. He paused. We made it through, but it was the first time I understood that the world was serious. That it wasn't, he searched for the word. That the cost of things was real. That people could be genuinely lost. He picked up a stick, turned it over in his hands. I'd known that before, technically. But there's knowing it and knowing it. Yes, she said, because she did know the difference. And specifically she knew it as the gap between the fact of her clan's displacement and the feeling of it, which had arrived separately and later and more completely than any fact. The fire popped. Somewhere in the middle distance, a night bird called once and went quiet. You lost someone, she said. That day. Or close to it. He was quiet. I'm not asking you to tell me who, she said. I'm asking if that's what it was. Close to it, he said. Not that day. Later. Your teacher. He looked at her. The she you mentioned, Kushina said. The first morning. The one who taught you sealing. He looked back at the fire. And others, he said. Not all at once. Over years. He set the stick down. The nature of the life. You know how that is. I know how that is, she said. They sat with the fire between them. She thought about the 7 years she had been in Konoha, which had been in many ways a good 7 years. She had learned, and trained, and built something that functioned as a life, but which had also been 7 years of knowing that the people she had grown up alongside were gone, dispersed, and some of them permanently. She thought about the specific texture of that knowledge and how it sat differently on different days and how the days when it sat heaviest were unpredictable, and therefore harder to manage. I found your training logs, Naruto said. She turned to look at him sharply. Not deliberately, he said immediately. I wasn't going through your things. There was a folder on the workbench and I moved it to find space for the 8th diagram, and it fell open. I didn't read them. He paused. Not much. How much is not much? Enough to know that you train every day, he said. Without exception. And that the log is in code, which is a specific choice for a personal document. She looked at the fire. The code is an old Uzumaki notation, she said. I started using it because it kept other people from reading the logs during academy. And then it was something of ours, the clan's. She paused. Writing in it is the only time I use it anymore. He was quiet for a long moment. I can read it, he said. She looked at him. Not everything, he said. Some of the notation is different from what I know. But the base structure, he met her eyes. I recognized it. She sat with this. The idea that there was someone else in the world who could read the things she wrote in when she wanted to be private, not because he had broken the code but because it was his too, she did not have a neat category for what it was. It was too many things at once to land cleanly. Okay, she said finally. You're not upset? Why would I be upset? Because it's private, he said. It's private because no one else can read it, she said. If you can read it, it's still Uzumaki. It's still, she stopped. It's fine. It's fine. She looked at the fire. What did you read? You've been here 7 years, he said. You train every day. You've been doing it since the first month, not to improve, not toward a specific mission target. You just do it. He was quiet. The log entries are very short. A few lines. What you worked on, how long. And then at the end of each one word. He met her eyes. Same word. Every day for 7 years. She was very still. Still here, he said. Very quietly. The fire, the night, the distance between the two of them across the campfire doing something it hadn't done before. Or doing something it had been doing for 3 weeks and was now more obviously doing. Yes, she said. He looked at her steadily. I did it at first because I wasn't sure I was going to be, she said. When I was 11, 12, when the clan had been gone for long enough that I understood it wasn't temporary. I wasn't sure I was going to want to keep being here. In Konoha. In this life. She said it flatly, as fact, without the weight she had once given it. It helped to write it down. Evidence. He said nothing, which was the correct response, the response that understood the difference between a thing that needed reply and a thing that needed witness. And then later she said, I kept doing it because it became true instead of aspirational. I was still here. And that was something. It's a great deal, he said. It was enough, she said. For a long time, it was enough. He was looking at her with the open expression, the unmanaged one. His hands were resting on his knees and the firelight was on his face, and his whisker marks were casting the faintest shadows, and he looked present. Fully, entirely present in the specific way she had noticed about him, the quality of his attention when he wasn't protecting anything, that made her feel very clearly seen. She found she was not, entirely, uncomfortable with this. She was somewhat uncomfortable with not being uncomfortable. They were 2 hours into the return journey the following afternoon when the fight happened. It started, as their fights would continue to start for the next 3 years, over something technical. She had asked him, while they navigated a ridge path with Daichi 20 meters ahead requiring minimal attention, about the 9th diagram, about a decision he had made in the seal array that she disagreed with. He had explained his reasoning. She had explained why his reasoning was wrong. He had said he didn't think she was accounting for the lateral variance. She had said she was accounting for the lateral variance, and that his solution to it created a different problem in the upper register. I've used this configuration before, he said. In practical applications. It holds. Under what conditions? She said. Sustained high-pressure situations. Hostile environments. Extended operational periods. He said it with the confidence of direct experience. Then your test cases have been extreme, she said. Of course it holds under extreme pressure. The question is whether it holds under ordinary sustained use, which is different. Ordinary sustained use has more variance because you're not in a controlled crisis state. The seal has to breathe. Seals don't breathe, he said. She stopped walking. He stopped walking. Daichi continued ahead, noticing nothing. Seals absolutely breathe, she said. That's fundamental. A seal is a living relationship between the chakra of the practitioner and the chakra of the subject. It has to have responsive capacity. It has to be able to adjust. If you build it rigid enough to withstand extreme pressure without adjustment, you get a seal that survives a crisis and fails in the month after when the situation becomes ordinary, and the chakra settles and the rigid structure doesn't settle with it. That's not, he stopped. He was frowning, not angrily but the way he frowned when he was genuinely working through something. That's not how I was taught. Then you were taught incompletely, she said. Or for a specific purpose that doesn't generalize. He was quiet for a moment. The frown deepened. The seal I'm most familiar with, he said, slowly and carefully, was designed for, it was a specific situation. A contained subject with high power output. It needed to be robust against pressure events. The ordinary variance wasn't. That wasn't the primary concern. Because the ordinary variance was someone's problem to manage, she said. Not the seal's. Yes, he said, after a moment. So the seal was built to withstand catastrophic failure, and offloaded the day-to-day maintenance onto. She stopped. She looked at him. Onto the host, she said. Something shifted in his expression. Yes, he said. She started walking again. Because standing still was making her feel the size of what she just understood. That's an extraordinary burden. On the host. The host managed, he said, in the precise tone of someone who had personal information about this. Managing is not the same as thriving, she said. I know that, he said, with the quiet that meant it was hitting something real. You were the host, she said. He said nothing. Naruto. Yes, he said. She walked. He walked. The path under them and the trees alongside and the ordinary sounds of travel around them. And she was thinking about the 9th diagram and about containment seals and about what it meant to build something that needed a person to compensate for its limitations every single day, indefinitely, for as long as the seal needed to hold. She did the best she could, he said. The person who, the seal wasn't, it wasn't a failure. It was extraordinary, for what it was doing. She didn't have much time to build it. She was doing it under. He stopped. Under very bad conditions. And it held. For a long time it held beautifully. But it required maintenance, Kushina said. Yes. From you. From me. A pause. And from her. Until she couldn't. She walked. She was fitting things together. Pieces she had been holding for 3 weeks. Placed side by side now by the clarity of technical argument opening into something larger. The seal that had keyed to her. The QB's history with him. The extraordinary chakra depth in someone his apparent age. The way he held power carefully. Not because he was hiding it but because he had been carrying something significant for so long that careful was simply how he moved. You were the Jinchuriki, she said. He was quiet. In your timeline, she said. The one you came from. You were the QB's Jinchuriki. Yes, he said. She walked with this for a while. She thought about being 7 years old and being told that you were going to carry something enormous for reasons that had nothing to do with you as a person. That you were going to be the vessel for a force that most people feared and many people hated, and that this was now the foundational fact of your life from which all other facts would need to be arranged. She thought about the training logs. Still here. How old were you? She said. The night I was born, he said. The path under them. The trees. The ordinary sounds. I'm sorry, she said. Not softly. She didn't do soft very naturally. It came out of her wrong. Too gentle to be genuine. Just directly. Plainly. The way she said all plainly sad things. Don't be, he said, also plainly. I'm not. Not anymore. He paused. It made me who I am. And I've made peace with who I am. It took a breath. It took a while. And a lot of help. But I got there. Who helped you? She said. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer, and she was already deciding not to push, when he said, everyone who stayed. She heard what he meant. Not the specifics, not the names, which she didn't have and wasn't going to get today, but the shape of it. The people who had remained present when presence had been difficult, the ones who had stayed after the point when leaving would have been understandable. She knew something about the specific value of those people. Because she had been given a smaller set of them and had learned to measure their worth carefully. And who left? She said. Some people, he said. Early on. When I was young enough that it left marks. She thought about the whisker marks on his face and about what kind of seal left marks on a person's body and about what kind of childhood was built around being the container for something that the village feared. She thought about a small boy with blonde hair and whisker marks eating alone or sleeping in a small space or learning to perform the loud, demanding version of himself as a way of insisting on existence in the face of indifference. She thought, with some precision, that she understood a great deal more about him than she had yesterday. The 9th diagram, she said, because the technical problem was still there and also because returning to it was a kindness. A way of moving them out of the deep water and back to solid ground without making the transition into an event. What about it? He said. Your configuration is wrong, she said. But your instinct about the pressure resistance isn't. I think we can build both. A seal that has genuine responsive capacity and doesn't sacrifice structural integrity under high-pressure events. It would be more complex. How much more complex? Significantly, she said. But I think we can do it. She glanced at him. Between the two of us. He was quiet for a moment. Then, between the two of us. Don't make it a thing, she said. I'm not making it a thing, he said, and she could hear in his voice that he was. Naruto. It's just a good configuration, he said, entirely too blandly. Two sealing practitioners working in combination on a complex technical problem. Very practical, she said. Not a thing. Good. They walked. Daichi was visible ahead, picking his way down a gentler grade toward the valley road, his survey equipment packed with the precise tension of someone who had opinions about its arrangement. The afternoon was warm and ordinary, and the argument had burned through and left something in its wake that was different from what had been there before. Not a resolution exactly, but a kind of clearing, the way a storm cleared air. She thought about his hands, flat on the table in the Hokage's office. Making himself be clear. She thought about the seal moves toward the person it most requires. She thought about a boy born with something inside him that he hadn't chosen, learning to carry it, and then learning to carry it well, and then learning, eventually, to call it his own. She thought, of course, that's who ends up here. She did not say any of this out loud. She was not ready for it out loud. She recognized with the honest self-awareness she tried to bring to everything, still in the process of understanding what the thing was before she decided what to do about it. They made camp that night on the valley floor, and the stars were very clear and the fire was small and Daichi was asleep again with his admirable thoroughness. She said, "Naruto?" He looked at her. "The logs," she said. "The Uzumaki notation. The entries." "Yes?" "Careful." Not knowing where this was going. "I write in them every morning," she said. "Before training. It's a habit. It's a way of starting the day from something real." She looked at the fire. "Tomorrow morning you can read the entry if you want. I won't code it." He was very still. "You don't have to," he started. "I know I don't have to," she said. "I'm choosing to." She met his eyes. "You told me things today that cost you. The least I can do is give you something back that's real." He looked at her for a long time, with the open expression, the unmanaged one. "Okay," he said. "Good," she said. She lay down. She looked at the stars. Beside her, a respectable distance away on the other side of the fire, she could hear him settle, the familiar sounds of his breathing arranging itself into the slow pattern he had when he was working toward sleep. She thought about the 9th diagram. She thought about seals that needed to breathe. She thought about building something that could withstand both crisis and the ordinary sustained pressure of a life that kept going after the crisis was over. She thought, "That's a hard problem." She thought, "I think we can do it." She closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, the words "still here" at the end of the day felt like more than evidence. It felt like something to look forward to. In the morning she wrote the log entry without code, in clear Uzumaki notation that anyone with the right roots could read, and she left it open on the bedroll when she went to tend the fire. He read it. She didn't watch him read it, but she was a sensor type, and her sensing didn't require her eyes, and she felt the specific shift in his chakra when he did, the warm, wordless quality of something received. She made the tea. She did not look at him when he came to sit beside her, but she handed him his cup first, before hers. That was, for now, enough. She had been thinking about it for longer than she admitted to anyone, including herself. That was the honest version. The version she had been avoiding for the better part of a month, because the honest version required her to acknowledge that what she was about to do was not a reaction to Naruto's arrival, not caused by him, not attributable to him, not something she was doing because of a person she had known for 4 weeks. She had principles about that kind of causation. She had seen enough of it in other people to know what it looked like from the outside, and what it looked like from the outside was not flattering. So she needed to be honest with herself about the timeline first. The timeline was, she had been uncertain for 8 months. 8 months before the boy with the whisker marks showed up in her river. She had sat across from Minato at dinner and watched him talk about the upcoming Chunin selection process. Watched his face arrange itself into the intelligent, purposeful expression it wore when he was engaged with a problem he genuinely cared about, and had thought, very quietly and without wanting to, "I am very fond of you and I do not want to marry you." She had put this thought away immediately. She had put it in the box where she put things that were inconvenient and potentially wrong, alongside the half-formed feelings she had never known what to do with, and the questions she had stopped asking because the answers complicated things. She had smiled at Minato across the dinner table, and said something about the Chunin selection criteria, and the evening had continued without incident. But the thought had been true when she had it, and it had stayed true in the box while she looked at it sideways for 8 months. And then Naruto had arrived and the box had become very small for everything that was in it, and eventually, on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks after they returned from the mission, the box had given up the attempt entirely. She waited until she was certain. She did not operate in half measures. Then she went to find Minato. He was at the academy. Late, after classes, in the way he often was, he stayed later than any other instructor, reorganizing materials and writing notes on student progress with the focused thoroughness of a person who took the things he was responsible for seriously. She had always admired this about him. She admired it now, standing in the doorway of his classroom looking at the clean lines of his posture at the desk, and it did not change anything. "Kushina," he said, when he heard her. He looked up, and his face did the thing it did when she appeared unexpectedly, a particular warmth, a slight softening at the corners of his eyes. An expression that was genuine and that she had valued very much and was about to put down carefully because she did not believe in breaking things that could be set down. "I need to talk to you," she said. He looked at her for a moment. He was very perceptive, Minato. She had always known this, had sometimes found it useful and sometimes found it the specific difficulty of being with someone who understood things before they were fully said. She watched him understand now in the 4 seconds between her sentence and his response. Not everything, not the details, but the shape of it. The category of what she was there for. He set down his pen. "All right," he said. She came in. She did not sit down, because this was not a conversation for sitting down. Sitting down suggested a longer negotiation, a back and forth, and that was not what this was. What this was a clear thing said clearly. She stood near the first row of student desks with her arms at her sides and looked at him directly. "I don't want to be unfair to you," she said. "That's the thing I want to start with. You deserve to not be lied to. And I haven't been lying, but I've been less honest than I should have been for longer than I should have been. And I want to correct that." He was very still. "I care about you," she said. "I care about you specifically and genuinely, and that doesn't change. But the way I care about you isn't," she breathed. "It isn't the way you care about me, and I know that. I've known it. I let it go on anyway because caring about you is real and I didn't want to lose it, and that was selfish. I'm sorry for that." The classroom was quiet. Outside, the academy grounds were doing their late afternoon emptiness. The sounds of the village beyond the walls, muffled by distance. One of the chalkboards still had the day's lesson on it. Academy students, a formation exercise, neat numbered diagrams in Minato's careful handwriting. "How long?" he said. 8 months, she said. "That I was certain. Before that, longer, that I was uncertain and not dealing with it honestly." He looked at her steadily. She watched him process this, watched the dignified, very private pain of it move across his face and be managed, not suppressed but managed, the way Minato managed everything, with the grace of someone who had decided, a long time ago, to maintain his quality regardless of the situation. "Is it someone else?" he said. Not accusatorially. Just carefully. "I came to tell you this before anything else happened," she said. "I want you to know that. I came to tell you this because it's true on its own, not because of any other reason." He heard what she was doing, answering the question without answering it. "Kushina, Minato, is it the Uzumaki?" She looked at him. "It's me," she said. "The truth I'm telling you is about me. About what I want, and what I've known, and what I should have said 8 months ago. Whatever else is, that's separate. I don't know what that is yet." He was quiet for a long moment. "You've never not known things," he said. "I know," she said. "It's inconvenient." Something very brief and very sad moved across his face. Almost a smile. "Yes," he said. "It is." She stood in the classroom and he sat at his desk, and the distance between them was not very far and was, already, different in kind than it had been an hour ago. She felt the loss of it, not regret, which would have been dishonest, but genuine mourning for something that had been real and had mattered and was now changing shape into something smaller. "I'm not angry," he said. "I know," she said. "You're not built for it." "I'm disappointed," he said. "I'm allowed to be disappointed." "You are," she said. "Entirely." "I thought," he stopped. He looked at his hands. Then he looked back at her, and whatever he had started to say, he set it down too. "I thought we had more time," he said finally, which was not what he had started to say, she could tell, but which was true anyway, and which she respected him for choosing. "We had the time we had," she said. He nodded, slowly. A Minato nod, precise, considered, the physical acknowledgement of a person accepting a fact. "Are we?" He stopped again. "I'd like to still be, a breath. You are one of the people in this village I value most. That's true regardless." "I know," she said. "Same. That doesn't go anywhere." "All right," he said. She turned to leave. At the door she stopped, because there was one more thing and it needed to be said cleanly. "You're going to be someone remarkable," she said. "You already are, but it's going to be the things you're going to do for this village, Minato. I know that. I want you to know that I know that, and I'm proud to know you, whatever shape this becomes." He looked at her. His expression was doing several things at once, which was unusual for him. "You say that like you've seen it." "I believe it," she said. Which was true. Which was different from what he meant, and which was the closest to honest she could get without crossing a line that wasn't hers to cross. She left. She walked out of the academy and into the evening and kept walking, past the training grounds and the market district and the park where the early autumn trees were beginning their slow color change, and she let herself feel everything about it. The real sadness of it, the genuine loss, the weight of 8 months of something becoming definite, and then she filed it carefully and walked home. The village found out within 48 hours. This was, she had always known, the specific tax of living inside a community of professionals trained to observe and report. It arrived in stages. First the looks, careful, cataloging, the look that said I have received information and am currently verifying it against primary sources. Then the conversations that stopped at a slightly different rate when she walked past. Then, on the third day, Yuhimina, a senior jonin who was kind but had the information metabolism of a very efficient administrative network, patted her arm in the mission hall and said something warm and imprecise about how these things happened and how she was a wonderful person. Kushina thanked her and kept moving. The version of events the village settled on, she gathered, was Kushina had ended it. Minato was heartbroken but dignified. The new Uzumaki was a factor, probably. Everyone had an opinion. She found that she cared very little about the opinion part. What she cared about, with more force than she had expected, was Naruto. She came home on the third day after the conversation with Minato to find the apartment quiet in a way it had not been for 4 weeks. Naruto's things, the small collection of items he had accumulated, the spare clothes she had given him and the additional pieces he had quietly acquired, the ceiling materials arranged on the workbench with his particular organizational logic, were all there. He was not. He had left a note. The note was in Uzumaki notation, clear and uncoded, which meant it was for her specifically. Training. Eastern grounds. Back late. Don't wait up. She put the note down. She made tea. She sat at the workbench and looked at the 9th diagram, the one they had been rebuilding together since they returned from the mission, the combined configuration that incorporated both structural integrity and responsive capacity, the one that was becoming something neither of them would have produced alone. And she thought about the conversation with Minato and about the look in Naruto's eyes the past 3 days and about the very specific behavior of a person who was removing themselves from a situation they felt responsible for. She drank her tea. She went to the Eastern training grounds. He was running forms. Alone, in the way he trained when he was working through something, not warm-up forms, not technical drilling, but the deep physical meditation of someone using movement to manage what was happening in their head. His chakra was even and controlled but running slightly warmer than his usual baseline, which was the equivalent, in Naruto terms, of a significant emotional event. She sat down at the edge of the training ground on the low stone wall that marked the perimeter, and watched him and waited. He noticed her within 30 seconds. She saw the awareness arrive in the slight shift of his movement, the adjustment in his chakra signature, as he registered her presence. He did not stop. He ran the form to its conclusion. He always ran things to their conclusion, she had noticed, never quit a thing part way. And then he stood with his hands at his sides and his breathing elevated and looked at her. You didn't have to come, he said. I wanted to, she said. You've been avoiding me. He came and sat down on the other end of the wall. Not close. She noticed the distance he had chosen, which was more than their usual and less than a stranger's, the distance of someone trying to be respectful in the direction he had decided respect looked. I'm not avoiding you, he said. You left a note, she said. I left information about my location. You left a note, she said again, with the emphasis that acknowledged his technical point and dismissed it simultaneously. You have been home for dinner every night since you arrived. 3 nights ago that stopped. She looked at him. What changed 3 nights ago? He looked at the training ground. The evening was coming in, the light going amber and low, the other training grounds nearby emptying of their daytime population. You know what changed, he said. I want to hear you say it. He exhaled. You talked to Minato. He turned the worn edge of his training glove over in his hands. I know you did. The whole village knows. And he stopped. I don't want to be the reason for that. I'm not. I didn't come here to. Stop, she said. He stopped. You did not end my relationship with Minato, she said. Kushina, you did not end it, she repeated, with the firmness of someone delivering a fact they have verified thoroughly. I ended it. I ended it because it was the honest thing to do, and it was the honest thing to do because of something that has been true for 8 months. 8 months, Naruto. You've been here for 4 weeks. He was quiet. The math doesn't work, she said. The thing you're blaming yourself for doesn't add up. You came to a situation that was already true, and you did not create the truth of it. She met his eyes when he finally looked at her. I need you to hear that clearly. I hear it, he said. I'm not sure I believe it. Why not? He was quiet for a moment. Then, because I know what he stopped. He started again. Because I know that whatever that my being here has affected things. Has changed things. And I don't know yet whether those changes are. I don't know if I have the right to them. She sat with this. She understood what he was doing, the moral accounting of a person who took their impact seriously, who had thought carefully about the ripples of their presence, and was genuinely troubled by the ones he couldn't control. She respected the impulse. She also thought he was making it into something more determinative than it was. You know what I was told, she said, when I arrived here? When I was 10 years old and the clan put me on a transport, and sent me to a village I had never seen to carry a thing I didn't choose? He looked at her. I was told that my purpose here was specific, she said. I was the host. I was the container. My value to Konoha was what I carried, and my job was to manage it correctly, and not cause problems. She looked at the training ground. For 3 years I believed that. I made myself small because small things take up the right amount of space, and the amount of space I was allowed felt very precise. What changed? He said. I got angry, she said. I decided that I was going to be a person in this village and not a function. And then I had to learn how to do that from the beginning, because nobody had shown me. She glanced at him. I'm telling you this because you're doing the version of the thing I did. You're measuring your right to be here against your utility, and your impact, and whether those things balance out. And I'm telling you that it doesn't work that way. It has never worked that way. He was very still. You have the right to be here, she said, because you're here. That's all the right you need. The training ground. The evening. A bird somewhere making a going-to-bed sound in the trees near the eastern wall. Kushina, he said. What? I know things about you, he said. About what you were, in the place I came from. Who you became. The things you did. The things you survived. His voice was very careful, and I know that what I know isn't fair. You haven't had the chance to become those things yet, or some of them, and I'm walking around with this enormous amount of information about a person who doesn't have it about herself, and I don't know what to do with that. I don't know if it's right. She was very quiet for a moment. What do you know? She said. More than I should, he said. Tell me one thing, she said. Not the hard things. Not the things that, just one thing. That you know about me. He thought about it for a long time. She let him think. You were loved, he said finally. Very loved. By people who were lucky to know you and who knew they were lucky. He met her eyes. That's one thing. She sat with this. The word were was in there, which was a tense she noticed. Not or but were, which pointed somewhere specific in the future she had not arrived at yet, and which she chose, deliberately and with full awareness, not to examine too closely right now. She chose instead to receive the thing he had actually given her, the loved, very loved, which landed somewhere real. Okay, she said. Okay? He said. It's a good thing to know, she said. Thank you for telling me. He looked at her with the open expression. The unmanaged one. In the amber evening light his whisker marks were very clear against his skin, and the deep, settled quality of his chakra was palpable at this distance, and she thought, with the clarity she had been building toward for 4 weeks, I know what this is. I have known for some time. The question is what I'm going to do about it. She unfolded from the wall and stood, brushing training ground dust from her trousers. Come home, she said. I ordered food. The good place, not the adequate place. He looked up at her. You ordered from the good place? Don't make it a thing. That place has a 2-hour wait on weekdays. I called ahead, she said, with the dignity of someone who had planned for this and was not going to pretend otherwise. Something moved across his face. Affection, she thought, the genuine, uncomplicated kind, the kind that didn't need to announce itself because it was simply there, steady as his chakra. He stood. Okay, he said. Stop leaving notes, she said. If you're going out, tell me. We live in the same. She stopped. Recalibrated. If you're going out, tell me. All right, he said. They walked back through the evening village, side by side, and she thought about 8 months of knowing something and not saying it, and about the specific relief of things becoming true out loud, even when the out loud part was still in progress. Minato came to find her a week later. He came to the apartment, knocked, because he was Minato and he always knocked, and she let him in and made tea because she was always going to make tea for him. That was not going to change. And they sat at her table the way they had sat at tables many times over the years they had been together, and it was different, and also, surprisingly, not as different as it could have been. Naruto was not there. He had gone to the archive, the Uzumaki Documentation Archive, which he had been working through steadily with a focus that the archivist had described to Kushina as impressively methodical, which from that particular archivist was significant praise. He was gone most mornings now. She had not arranged this. It was simply what the day had become. How are you? She asked Minato. I'm fine, he said. He said it in the way that meant he was working on it, and the work was going well. I've had time to think. I've been thinking. About what you said. He wrapped his hands around his teacup. That you've known for 8 months. He looked at her. I've been asking myself how I didn't. You knew something, she said. You're not unperceptive. I knew something was different. I told myself it was your assignment load. The seal work. He was quiet. I think I knew and didn't know. At the same time, the way you can know something and keep it in the part of your head that doesn't connect to the part that acts. I did that too, she said. For the 8 months and before. Yes, but you dealt with it, he said. I was waiting for it to resolve on its own. He looked out the window. I think I was hoping it would, she nodded. This was honest, and she respected it. The Uzumaki, he said. Naruto. She looked at him. I want to be fair, he said carefully. About him. About the situation. He met her eyes. I won't pretend I don't have feelings about it. I do, but I've been thinking about what I can observe, which I'm better at than feelings. The slight self-awareness of this, offered plainly. And what I can observe is that his chakra is unlike anything I've studied. And his sealing knowledge is genuinely extraordinary. And the work he and you have been producing together is, I've seen some of the preliminary notation and it's innovative in ways that have real applications. Yes, she said. And I can observe, he said, more quietly, that you are different since he arrived. In ways I've been trying to identify precisely. He was quiet for a moment. You seem present. In a way you weren't always. You seemed accounted for. Capable. Contained. But not always present in the way you are now. She sat with this. I'm not saying that to. I'm not making a point with it, he said. I'm not saying it to be gracious. I'm saying it because it's accurate, and I think you should know it. Thank you, she said. Thank you, Minato. He drank his tea. He looked at the ceiling diagrams on her walls, which had proliferated significantly in the past month, more of them, more complex. The combined notation she and Naruto had been developing filling 3 new panels alongside her original work. He wrote some of those, Minato said. We wrote them together, she said. He nodded slowly. Can I ask you something directly? Yes. What is he? He said. Not who. I know who he presents himself as. What is he, actually? What situation is he actually in? She looked at her teacup. She thought about what the Hokage had told her implicitly, and what he had told her explicitly, and where the line was between those two things. Then she thought about Minato, about who he was and who he was going to become, and what he deserved in terms of honest accounting from the people he trusted. He came from somewhere he can't go back to, she said. He lost a great deal. People, and a life, and a place. He carries things that are hard to carry. She looked at him. He's not a threat to anyone here, the Hokage knows this. He's been verified. She paused. He's Uzumaki. Whatever else, that part is real. Minato studied her. And you trust him? Yes, she said. Why? She thought about training logs and the letter she had left uncoded and the 9th diagram and his hands flat on the table, and the sound of him sleeping quietly, finally, after the first 2 nights of fighting something in dreams. She thought about everything he had told her, and everything he hadn't, and the specific texture of honest restraint, which she recognized from her own practice of it. Because he's been careful with the things I've shown him, she said. Every one of them. Minato was quiet for a long moment. He finished his tea. He set the cup down with the precision he brought to all small actions. All right, he said. He stood. He gathered himself. The particular Minato gathering, the invisible adjustment of the full upright. The thing that meant he had processed and decided and was moving forward from whatever the situation was. He looked at her with the expression she recognized as the dignified version of something that cost him. I meant what I said in the classroom, he said. Whatever shape this becomes. That part stands? I know, she said. Same. He left. She sat at her table for a while longer, looking at the ceiling diagrams. At the combined notation filling 3 panels. At the work that had come from 2 people bringing their knowledge together, and arriving somewhere either of them had been able to reach alone. She thought about shapes. About things becoming what they were actually going to be. Naruto came home mid-afternoon to find her at the workbench with the 9th diagram, which she had been waiting to continue until he returned. He looked at her, then at the diagram, then back at her. Minato came, she said before he could ask. We talked. It was all right. It was what it needed to be. He set down the archive notes he was carrying. Are you all right? Yes, she said. She looked at him. Are you going to keep asking me that? Probably, he said. For a while. I'm all right, she said again. Then, because honesty was her practice, and she was going to be honest, I'm sad about it. The real parts of it, the parts that were real. I'm allowed to be sad. Yes, he said. You are. But I'm also, she looked at the diagram. I'm clear. I know what I did and why I did it, and I do it the same way again, and that's a clean feeling. Even when it's sad. He sat down at the other end of the workbench. He looked at the 9th diagram, at the combined notation, at the configuration they had been building. His chakra settled into the easy, present quality it had when he was ready to work. Okay, he said. The upper register, she said. The responsive layer. I think I figured out the anchor notation problem. Show me, he said. She showed him. They worked until dark, and the apartment held them easily, and the diagram grew into something that was beginning to look, in both their estimations, like it might actually solve what they had been trying to solve, something that could withstand enormous pressure, and still breathe, that was strong enough for crisis and flexible enough for the ordinary sustained weight of a life. She thought appropriate. She did not say it out loud, but when she looked up from the diagram and found him already looking at her, not with the careful management, not from behind anything, just looking, the way he looked when he had stopped protecting things, she thought it was possible he was thinking something similar. She looked back at the diagram. The lower anchor, she said. Let's do the lower anchor next. Yes, he said, and picked up his brush. Outside, Konoha continued being itself, busy and ordinary and full of the unremarkable daily life of a village that did not know that in a small apartment on the 4th floor of a building near the academy, 2 people were sitting across a workbench building something new out of everything they had each learned to carry. The kyubi, deep in its seal, pressed gently against the boundary, not with agitation, with the particular quality of something that recognized that the situation was resolving in the right direction. Kushina felt it, and did not say anything. She made a note in the margin of the diagram. She kept working.